The void was endless, a black sea without horizon. A single alien ship floated broken and alone, its engines dead, its hull cracked from battle. Inside, dim lights flickered, systems barely holding together. The survivors sat in silence, their eyes hollow. They were soldiers once, proud warriors of the Galaxy Council. Now they were stranded, abandoned in the emptiness where no signal could reach. Every corridor carried the sound of failure, the sound of despair. Captain Veyer stood at the center of the ruined bridge, his hands gripping the rail. He had led his crew into battle against the enemy swarm. They had fought with all their strength, but the swarm had been endless. His fleet was gone, scattered wrecks now drifting among the stars. Only his ship had survived, if survival was the right word. The crew whispered among themselves, their voices broken. "There is no rescue," one said. "No one knows we are here," another muttered. "Our distress beacon is dead. The silence will be our grave." The captain heard them but said nothing. He had no words of hope left, only duty. His people looked at him for strength, but he was as lost as they were. The void had no mercy. It would swallow them whole. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time had no meaning in the silence. The crew rationed what little oxygen and water remained. Every breath felt heavier, every second stretched like eternity. The youngest officer, Kyle, stared out of the broken viewport. Stars burned like cold fires across the black. "Captain," he said softly, "do you think anyone will come?" The captain closed his eyes, then opened them with steel in his voice. "No one comes to the void, Kyle, not for us." But deep inside, even as he spoke those words, something in him refused to surrender. The galaxy was vast, yes, but not empty. Somewhere life still burned. Somewhere, there was a chance, however small. And in the middle of the silence, a faint sound echoed through the comms. At first they thought it was static, a trick of the dying systems, but the signal pulsed again, sharper this time. The crew froze, their tired eyes widening. "Captain," the comm officer whispered, his hands shaking, I am picking up something." The captain moved closer, his heart pounding. "What is it?" he demanded. "A ping, sir," repeating, "steady. It is not ours." The bridge filled with tension, everyone leaning forward. Could it be a scavenger, come to strip them of the last of their lives? Could it be the enemy, hunting survivors? Or could it be something else? The sensor display flickered to life, faint green lines crawling across the screen. A shape appeared in the distance, far beyond normal range. At first it was only a shadow against the stars, but slowly, it grew clearer. A ship, massive, silent, moving with purpose. "Identify," the captain ordered. The computer tried, but its systems were too broken. The answer came in fragments, broken data, but enough to spark disbelief. The crew stared at the screen, mouths open. "It cannot be," one whispered. But the truth was clear, it was a human warship. For a moment, no one spoke. Humans were myths to most, ghosts of wars long past. They were known for appearing where no one expected, for fighting when all others would fall. But to see one here in the dead void was beyond reason. The crew trembled, not from fear but from awe. "Why would they be here?" Kale asked in a hushed voice. No one answered, because no one knew. The silence of the void was broken, and with it, the silence inside their hearts. The captain straightened, his despair cracking, replaced by something he had not felt in days, hope. He turned to his crew, his voice firm. "Signal them, now. Send whatever power we have left." The comm officer nodded, hands moving fast, sparks flying from the dying console. The signal burst into the void, weak and fractured. For long minutes nothing returned, only static. The crew's hope wavered again. But then, through the static, a voice broke through, strong and steady. "Hold on, you are not alone." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Every survivor froze, tears welling in their eyes. The voice was human, clear and unyielding, against all reason, against the impossible. A human warship had found them. Captain Veyer's hands shook. The silence of the void had been shattered, and with it, the fate of his crew had changed forever. The voice still echoed across the broken bridge. "Hold on, you are not alone." For a long moment, no one moved. It felt unreal, like a dream spoken into the void. The survivors stared at each other, their breath shallow. Then the captain finally whispered, "They heard us." The crew erupted with cries, some laughing, some crying, but the captain raised his hand. "Stay calm. This is only the beginning." The sensors flickered again, revealing the outline of the massive human warship. Its hull was black and sharp like a blade, covered with scars from countless battles. Lights rippled across its sides, cold and blue like eyes watching the stars. It moved slowly but with perfect control, every motion deliberate. The alien crew had seen warships before. They had seen dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers. But this was different. This ship carried an aura, a weight of something more. It was not just a machine. It was a presence, a shadow that swallowed the silence of the void. The youngest officer, KL, whispered with awe, "It looks alive." The captain nodded, though even he felt a tremor in his heart. He had heard stories of humanity's ships. Some claimed they were bonded with their crews. Some claimed they never truly died. But seeing one here was something else entirely. The comms crackled again. "This is the Terran warship Resolute. Identify yourself." The alien captain forced strength into his voice. "This is Captain Vayar of the Sikiarishis. Council ship Drylus. We are stranded. Systems failing. Survivors aboard. Request assistance." There was a pause, heavy and cold. The alien crew held their breaths, waiting for judgment. Then the human voice returned, steady as iron. "Copy that, Drylus. We are moving to intercept." The survivors sighed with relief, but it did not last. Another officer shouted from the sensors, "Captain, multiple signatures approaching. Unknown vectors." The bridge tensed. On the display, faint red lights appeared far in the distance, moving fast. Enemy scavengers, or worse. The swarm. The survivors froze, their hope twisting back into fear. The captain clenched his fists. "They have found us." The crew's hearts sank. If the enemy arrived before rescue, their deaths were certain. But the human warship did not hesitate. The Resolute changed course, shifting between the survivors and the incoming signatures. Its engines flared with light, cutting across the void with speed. It was not moving to escape. It was moving to fight. The alien crew watched in disbelief. No Council warship would risk itself for another stranded vessel. But the humans, they moved as if protecting them was the only choice. Inside the alien bridge, tension grew with every second. KL whispered, his voice shaking, "Captain, they will not survive against so many." But the captain's eyes never left the human warship. "You do not know humans, KL," he said softly. "They do not count odds the way we do." The void grew darker as the enemy signatures closed in. The Resolute activated its weapon arrays, massive cannons sliding into position. Energy fields shimmered around it like wings of light. Even damaged, the Drylus could feel the thrum of its power. The silence was gone, replaced by a hum that filled the bones of every survivor. "By the stars," one crew member whispered. "It is like the void itself fears them." The captain stepped forward, his voice steady for the first time in days. "Crew, remember this moment, for you will tell your children of it. You will tell your people, humanity has come to the void." On the screen, the red signatures grew brighter, faster. The enemy was almost here. The human warship's comms lit once more. "Drylus, hold your position. No matter what happens, you are not to move." Captain Vayar's throat tightened. "Understood," he replied, though fear gnawed at him. The alien survivors stared at the massive shadow of the Resolute as it stood guard. One ship against many, one warship against the storm. Kale whispered again, "Captain, why do they fight for us?" And the captain answered without hesitation, "Because they are human." The void trembled as the first enemy ships dropped from faster than light, dozens of them, black and jagged, hungry for death. The Drylus shook from the shockwaves of their arrival, but the human warship did not flinch. It waited, calm, patient, like a predator that had chosen its prey. The alien crew gripped their seats, their hearts racing. The silence before the storm stretched unbearably long. Then, with a roar that echoed across the stars, the human warship opened fire. The first blast from the human warship split the void like thunder. A beam of light tore through the darkness, striking the lead enemy ship. It exploded into fragments, burning across the stars like falling embers. The survivors aboard the Draelus gasped, their eyes wide. The human ship had not only fired, it had destroyed an enemy vessel in a single strike. More enemy ships appeared, their weapons flashing red, filling the void with fire. But the Resolute moved with impossible speed, twisting through space as if it had danced this battle 1,000 times. Every gun on its hull roared, every cannon lit the darkness with fury. The alien survivors clutched their seats, unable to look away. It was not just a fight, it was a storm. And at the center of it was humanity's shadow. Kale whispered, his voice trembling. It fights as if the void belongs to it. The captain nodded, though his throat was tight. This is not a ship. This is a legend given shape. On the bridge of the Draelus, the comms crackled again. Through the static came that same human voice, calm and steady. Draelus, stay with us. We will not leave you behind. The crew froze, stunned by the certainty in those words. Not leave them behind, not abandon them to the dark. For the Council, leaving them had been logical. For the enemy, destroying them was necessary. But for the humans, saving them was a choice made without hesitation. Enemy ships swarmed, their numbers rising. The Resolute took hit after hit, shields flaring, armor burning, but it did not falter. Every time a wave came, it answered with fire. Every time the void threatened silence again, the humans roared louder. Captain, one alien officer cried, they cannot last. There are too many. But Captain Vayar only watched, his fists clenched. No, he whispered. You do not understand them. They fight until there is nothing left, not even the void itself. Another explosion rippled across the stars, another enemy vessel torn apart by the Resolute's guns. But then, a terrible flash struck the human warship. The Draelus trembled as shockwaves rattled through space. On the screen, sparks burst from the Resolute's side, its armor splitting, flames licking into the void. The alien survivors gasped in horror. Kale cried out, "They are finished!" But before despair could take them, the human voice returned over the comms, unbroken, unyielding. Draelus, do not lose hope. We are still here. The bridge went silent, every heart frozen. They stared at the battered ship still standing. Through smoke and fire, the Resolute shifted its angle, cannons charging against. Ayn, it was wounded, bleeding metal into the stars, but its spirit had not cracked. By the stars, one alien whispered, they do not know fear. The enemy fleet began to circle, spreading wide to trap the humans, their guns locked, ready to unleash a storm. The alien crew braced themselves, waiting for the end. But then the Resolute did something no one expected. It went dark, engines powered down, weapons ceased fire, lights vanished. To the enemy, it looked like a dead hulk drifting in the void. Confusion rippled across the alien survivors. What are they doing? Kael shouted. The captain narrowed his eyes. They are hunting. The void fell silent again, broken only by the cautious movements of the enemy fleet. Then, with a sudden blaze of power, the human warship lit up again, engines roaring, cannons blazing. It struck from the shadows, cutting through the enemy's unprepared line. Ships exploded one after another, fire scattering like meteors. The alien survivors were thrown against their seats as shockwaves ripped past their crippled ship. Kael shouted in awe. They tricked them. They made the void their weapon. The captain's lips curved into something close to a smile. This is how humans fight. But even with the surprise, the battle was not over. The enemy still had numbers, and every moment dragged the humans closer to collapse. The Draelus rattled with every explosion around them. The survivors felt both terror and awe. They were watching history unfold, a story no one would believe unless they lived it. The comms sparked again. The human voice returned, heavy with command. Prepare your ship, survivors. When we give the word, you will be evacuated. Captain Vayar swallowed hard. You will risk yourselves for us. The voice replied without hesitation. We are human. We do not leave anyone in the dark. The alien bridge fell silent, every crew member trembling. In that moment, they understood. This was not only rescue, this was a revelation, a truth the galaxy had forgotten, but would soon remain. Ember, The human warship roared again, guns blazing, tearing another enemy apart. The void was no longer silent. It sang with fire and thunder, and the survivors of the Draelus knew. As long as the humans stood, the silence would never claim them again. The void burned with wreckage, fire drifting in silence. The Resolute still fought, but every strike left scars across its hull. The Draelus survivors watched with pounding hearts, torn between awe and terror. On the alien bridge, the crew clung to hope. They had seen the human warship defy impossible odds, yet they knew numbers always won in the end. The enemy was regrouping, forming a ring around the human ship. The trap was closing. "Captain," Kale whispered, "they will not survive this." But Captain Veyer did not answer. His eyes locked on the human vessel. Something inside him told him this was not the end. Humans never ended quietly. The comms crackled again. A new voice came through, not calm this time, but sharp with command. "This is Commander Hale of the Resolute. Draelus survivors, prepare yourselves. Evacuation will begin soon." The crew gasped, their voices rising in panic. "Evacuation now, in the middle of this battle. It's suicide, they'll be torn apart." But the human commander's voice cut through their fear like steel. "We don't ask permission. We give orders when lives are at stake. Get ready." The alien crew froze, silence filling the bridge. For the first time since the battle began, they felt something stronger than fear, discipline, certainty, the weight of command. Humans were not asking, they were deciding, because humans had already chosen to die before they abandoned anyone. Inside the Resolute, tension was just as heavy. Human officers argued across their bridge. "Sir, we can't waste pods. Our shields are failing. If we break formation, the swarm will overwhelm us." Commander Hale stood, firm, his voice steady. "We don't leave them. I don't care if it costs us the ship. We will get them out." The crew hesitated, then nodded, because they were human, and that was enough. Back on the Draelus, the survivors felt the docking clamps shake. The first rescue pods launched from the Resolute, small and fragile against the storm. Their engines burned bright as they darted through debris, weaving between enemy fire. Each second felt like a lifetime. Every explosion threatened to erase them. "Pod Alpha has locked," the comm officer shouted. The survivors cheered as human shapes entered their broken ship, armored soldiers in black suits, visors glowing blue. They moved with speed, with purpose, as if nothing could touch them. One of the survivors gasped, "They came for us. They really came." The human soldiers spread out, scanning corridors, guiding survivors into groups. Their voices carried confidence. "Stay calm. Follow us. We will get you out." The aliens obeyed without question, pulled by the strength in those words. On the Resolute's bridge, alarms screamed. "Enemy reinforcements inbound," an officer reported. Commander Hale clenched his jaw. "How many?" "Too many, sir." The enemy fleet was doubling, ships dropping out of faster than light one after another. The trap was no longer closing. It was crushing. The Resolute could not hold forever, yet Hale did not hesitate. "Keep firing. Keep the pods moving. We buy them time with our lives if we must." The human ship blazed with fury, cannons firing in all directions. It spun like a predator surrounded by wolves, every strike killing, every maneuver defiant. The aliens aboard the Draelus could only stare. Their rescuers were not saviors from safety. They were warriors carving salvation out of fire. Kale whispered again, his voice trembling with awe. "Why do they fight for us? Why do they not run?" And Captain Veyer finally answered, his voice filled with iron. "Because they are human, and humans never run from the darkness." Another explosion tore across the Resolute's hull, fire spraying into the void. The ship shuddered, lights flickering, but still it held. Every hit it took was another second bought for the survivors. Every scar on its body was a shield over lives that were not even its own. The human soldiers aboard the Draelus gathered more survivors. "Pods are almost full," one reported, but the ship was breaking apart, metal groaning under the strain. Time was running out. Then the comms blared again. Commander Hale's voice filled both ships, sharp and clear. "Draelus, hold fast. We will not let the void take you." The survivors trembled. For the first time since their defeat, they believed it. They believed the humans would hold back the void itself if they had to. And outside, in the endless darkness, the Resolute prepared to do exactly that. The Draelus groaned as metal tore under pressure. Air hissed through cracks, alarms screamed, corridors shook. The survivors clung to walls, waiting for death to swallow them. But instead of silence, they saw human soldiers rushing in, their voices sharp, their movements fast. "Stay calm, this way, move," one shouted. His voice was a blade cutting through fear. The aliens obeyed, stumbling after them, their hopelessness replaced with desperate hope. On the bridge, Captain Vayer watched the Resolute through the viewport. It stood like a wall between them and the enemy fleet, cannons blazing, engines burning, every strike shaking the stars. But the enemy pressed harder, hundreds of guns spitting fire. The human warship was bleeding light into the void, yet it did not fall. The comms lit up again. "This is Commander Hale, Drayless report." "Survivors boarding pods now," Vayer replied, his voice tight. "Good. We'll hold as long as we can. Get them all out," Hale answered. A violent blast struck the Drayless, throwing crew to the ground. Panels burst, smoke filled the bridge. Cale coughed, panic and hug. His voice. "Captain, the hull will not last." Vayer clenched his fists. "Then we trust the humans to finish what they started." Inside the corridors, the human soldiers moved with machine precision. One carried a wounded alien over his shoulder. Another shielded a group with his own body as sparks rained from collapsing ceilings. Their suits bore scratches, their visors cracked, but their pace never slowed. "Pods nearly full," one soldier reported. "Then launch them," came the order. Small craft detached from the Drayless, engines flaring, streaking toward the Resolute. Enemy fire streaked across their paths, but human point defense lit up, intercepting shots with walls of fire. One pod shook violently as debris scraped its side. Survivors screamed, but the humans guided it through, refusing to let it fall. Back on the Resolute, Commander Hale stood like stone among chaos. "Report," he barked. "Pods 1 through 4 docked, pods 5 and 6 en route, shields at 20%, hull breaches on decks 12 and 14. The ship trembled with another impact, sparks showering across the bridge. "Keep firing," Hale commanded, "and keep those pods safe." The crew obeyed without hesitation. Every man and woman on that ship knew the truth. They were fighting not for victory, but for lives. For strangers who were once enemies, now protected as if they were their own. The enemy circled closer, their voices hissing across intercepted comms. "Crush them, finish the humans, none survive." But the Resolute answered with fire. Torpedoes streaked across the dark, detonating enemy vessels in clouds of flame. The void shook as giants clashed on the Drayless bridge. Kyle trembled as he saw the human warship surrounded. "They cannot win, Captain. They are too few." But Captain Vayer placed a hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Look again, Kyle. They are not fighting to win. They are fighting so we live." Another blast rocked the ship. "Pod 7 away," came the cry. The last survivors rushed through. Smoke-filled halls guided by human hands. Among them, a child clung to her mother, eyes wide with fear. A human soldier bent low, his voice gentle through the roar. "Don't be afraid, little one. We'll get you home." The final pod sealed and detached, engines blazing toward the Resolute. The alien survivors held their breath as it weaved between enemy fire. It was the last chance, the final gamble. If it fell, so did their hope. Enemy ships turned to intercept, guns charging. The Resolute shifted course, throwing itself into the line of fire. Shields flared, armor screamed, but the pod made it through. The aliens cried out in relief as it locked into the human ship's bay. "All pods secured," came the report. On the Drayless bridge, Captain Vayer sagged against the rail. Tears filled his eyes. "They saved us. By the stars, they saved us." But the battle was not done. The Drayless shuddered, tearing apart under the strain. "Abandon ship," Vayer ordered. Though his words were bitter, the last view through the viewport was the Resolute, blazing like a dying sun, still fighting, still holding. On the human bridge, Commander Hale gave his final order. "All survivors secure, prepare for jump, hold the line until the last second." His crew answered as one. "Aye, Commander." The enemy swarmed, the void filled with fire. The Resolute stood alone, a shield against the storm, and in that shield's shadow, a new bond was forged. Aliens who once thought humans were myths now knew the truth. They were not myths. They were something greater. The Drayless broke apart behind them, fragments of its shattered hull spinning into the void. The last survivors were safe aboard the Resolute, but the battle was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The enemy fleet had grown, dozens of ships now circling like vultures, their weapons burned red against the darkness, locking onto the human warship. The Resolute stood alone, battered and scarred, but unyielding. Its silhouette glowed like a black spear wreathed in fire. On the alien survivor deck, KL clutched the rail, watching through the viewport. His voice shook. They saved us, but they cannot save themselves. Captain Vayar stared at the human vessel, his chest heavy with dread and awe. Do not be so quick to bury them, KL. Humans have a way of breaking death itself. The human bridge was chaos and discipline mixed as one. Alarms blared, consoles sparked, the deck trembled under every impact. Shields at 12%, an officer cried. Forward batteries running hot, we cannot sustain this, another shouted. But Commander Hale stood tall in the center, his eyes fixed on the burning void. Hold the line, he ordered, his voice unshakable. We are not done yet. The swarm ships closed in, hungry to crush their prey, but the Resolute struck first. Its cannons roared, spitting fire into the darkness. One enemy ship shattered into fragments, another spun out of control before exploding. The void became a storm of light and death. The alien survivors gasped, their fear turning into stunned silence. Every shot from the human ship carried precision, fury, and defiance. It was not a retreat. It was a statement. Humans did not bow, not to numbers, not to death, not to the void, but the enemy pressed harder, filling the darkness with endless fire. The Resolute's hull cracked again, flames tearing across its side, metal screamed, lights flickered, but still it fought. Every wound it took was answered with thunder. On the alien deck, a child cried. Will they die now? She asked softly. A human soldier knelt beside her, helmet under his arm, his face grim but calm. Not while you're here, little one, he said. This ship will burn before it lets you fall. The enemy fleet changed formation, closing tighter, preparing to overwhelm. Commander, they're focusing fire, an officer warned. Hale's voice cut sharp. Then we give them fee, or they cannot survive. He raised his hand. Activate the Helios batteries. The crew hesitated, eyes wide. Sir, that will drain the core. Do it, Hale snapped, his voice unyielding. We are not here to live forever. We are here to make the void remember us. A deep hum filled the ship, vibrating through every wall. The alien survivors felt it in their bones. The Resolute's core burned brighter, channeling impossible energy into its guns. On the outside, the ship glowed like a star awakening. Enemy captains shouted across their comms. Destroy it now before it fires. The void erupted with a rain of enemy blasts. Shields failed, armor split, decks buckled. The Resolute staggered, its body screaming in pain. But the Helios batteries lit, and the void itself seemed to shatter. Beams of searing light cut across the darkness, wide and merciless. Enemy ships vanished in fire, entire wings torn apart in seconds. The survivors aboard the Resolute were thrown to the ground from the recoil. The aliens pressed their faces to the glass, eyes wide with terror and awe. It was not a battle anymore. It was judgment. One enemy captain screamed before his ship was torn apart. This is not a warship. This is a monster, Kale whispered in disbelief. No, this is humanity. For a moment, silence followed, broken only by drifting wreckage. The enemy fleet wavered, their numbers broken, their courage shaken. But more ships still lurked beyond, waiting. The Resolute had burned bright, but its light was fading. Power drained, shields gone, hull cracked like shattered bone. On the human bridge, smoke filled the air. Officers worked with bleeding hands. Commander, systems failing. We cannot fire again. Hale closed his eyes, then opened them with iron resolve. Then we fight with what we have left, tooth and claw, until the last breath. On the alien deck, Captain Vayar's voice too trembled. They will die for us, every one of them. They knew it from the start. Kyle's eyes filled with tears. But why, Captain? Why would they do this? Vayar answered softly. Because humans do not ask what they gain, they ask who they save. The enemy regrouped, circling like predators sensing weakness. The Resolute drifted, its light dimming, its weapons silent. But even broken, it did not retreat. Its very presence still screamed defiance, a message carved into the stars. And as the enemy closed for the final strike, The alien survivors held their breath. The humans had one last card to play, one last fire in the darkness. The void was littered with fire and wreckage. The Resolute drifted in silence, its body broken, its light dim. The alien survivors aboard its decks clung to hope and fear. The enemy fleet circled closer, their guns ready for the final strike. On the alien survivor deck, Kale whispered, "It is over, Captain. They cannot fight anymore." Captain Veyer's eyes stayed fixed on the burning silhouette of the human ship. "Do not speak too soon, Kale. Humans fight long after the end." On the human bridge, smoke choked the air, consoles sparked, bodies lay wounded, but Commander Hale stood tall, his uniform scorched, his voice steady. "Status," he demanded. "Shields gone, weapons offline, engines at 6%, an officer reported. "Enemy fleet closing," another said. The ship was dying, but the spirit inside it burned brighter than ever. Hale looked around at his battered crew. "They think this is our end," he said, his voice rising through the chaos. "They think the void will take us quietly." He slammed his fist against the rail. "But we are human, and humanity does not go quietly." The crew roared, voices filled with fire even as their ship bled. They turned to their failing consoles with renewed fury, hands shaking, faces streaked with sweat and blood, but still they worked, because they were human, and that was enough. The enemy prepared their killing blow, dozens of ships charging weapons. The void burned red as energy gathered across their hulls. The alien survivors trembled, holding each other, waiting for the end. But then the Resolute moved. Its engines flared, a burst of power drawn from reserves no one believed remained. The ship turned, its prow facing the enemy head-on. Every survivor felt the shift in the air. The ship was not fleeing. It was charging. Commander Hale's voice thundered across both human and alien decks. "Dryless survivors, hear this? You live today because humanity chose you. You will carry this truth to your people. You will tell them that in the void, humanity stands." Tears streamed down alien faces. They had been abandoned by their own council. Yet here, in the darkest place, strangers had burned themselves to protect them. The enemy fleet fired, red beams streaking across the void. But the Resolute answered, not with guns, for its weapons were gone, but with its very body. Engines screamed as it accelerated, a spear of steel and fire. It tore through the enemy formation, ramming headfirst into the largest cruiser. The impact ripped space apart, explosions tearing outward like a dying star. The enemy line shattered, ships colliding, flames scattering across the void. The alien survivors screamed, some in terror, most in awe. They watched as the human warship disappeared in the storm, one ship against a fleet, one final strike against the darkness. Silence followed, heavy and eternal. Wreckage drifted, enemy signatures vanished. The survivors waited, hearts breaking. Then, through the haze of fire and debris, a shape emerged. The Resolute, broken, scarred beyond recognition, but still alive. Its engines sputtered, its hull torn open, but it still moved, still defiant, still unbroken. The alien survivors wept, their voices trembling. They live by the stars, they live. The comms crackled again, weak but steady. Commander Hale's voice came, rough, softer now, but no less powerful. "Drayless survivors, you are safe. Humanity does not abandon the lost." Captain Veyer bowed his head, his voice breaking. "Commander Hale, you have given us more than life. You have given us hope." Hale answered simply, "Then carry it. Make it worth the fire we bled." The galaxy would remember. The survivors would tell their people, their children, their children's children, that when the Council abandoned them, when the enemy came to erase them, it was not their own who saved them. It was humanity. The legend spread like wildfire, whispered across stations and worlds. In the void, where silence kills, a human warship stood alone, and in its fire, the darkness broke. Kale stood beside his captain, his voice filled with awe. "Captain, will the galaxy believe us?" Veyar looked at the drifting Resolute, its scars glowing like metals. "They will believe, Kale, because legends cannot be silenced." The human warship faded into the distance, carrying its survivors home. The void had tried to claim them, but instead it had given birth to a new truth, a truth carved in fire, in blood, in defiance, that humanity did not fear the dark. Humanity was the fire in the darkness.